我想我们现在人数已经非常多了，所以我们就今天就开始哈。
Since we have already got so many participants, let's
法
start
师
today.
旧金山道场的师兄姐，
Venerables, brothers and sisters from the San Francisco Chang Center, and everyone on Zoom and Facebook. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good morning. I'm the host for today's lecture today, Diana. It is our pleasure today to meet everyone again today for the third class of Vimalakirti Sutra by Venerable Chang. Before this class, we'll proceed with the etiquette first. Please join palms. Bow. Bow to Master Sheng Yan, the founder of DDM. Bow to the Venerable. Okay, now let's recall the class on Wednesday. Venerable Changchi introduced the second, third, fourth chapters, as well as the first half of the fifth chapter of the Vimalakirti Sutra. We saw Vimalakirti constantly challenging the Sravaka Bodhisattvas in the second to fourth chapters, reminding them of the inadequacy of duality. In the fifth chapter, when Vimalakirti responded to Manjusri, he taught us how to utilize the three levels of emptiness and the mind of great compassion to control our minds. Venerable Changxi used many practical examples to illustrate these ideas, which was very beneficial to all of us. Now, without further ado, please join me to welcome Venerable Changxi to continue his talk on the Vimalakirti Sutra. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The brief review by the host. And I'll start from where we ended last time. The last time we talked about how the Bodhisattva subjugate their mind. And we talked about, last time how Bodhisattva who are ill subjugate their mind. So we talked about using emptiness, the void of self, Dharma and emptiness, and also to use a great compassionate mind to subjugate the mind. So to subjugate yourself is not enough. The sutra says you have to help deliver others. So how do we help others, liberate others? We have to use two wisdoms. And what are they? They're a prajna and the expedient means. So from there, there's two types as well. The first is explaining how to liberate others, and as well as and explaining the liberation of the binding of bodhisattvas. So what are the bindings of bodhisattva is to incomplete wisdom, and also the incompleteness of the expedient means. So when you have an ability to help yourself and deliver others, then you will be able to manifest the proper path of bodhisattva, the 32 practices of the bodhisattva conduct. And so Kumarjiva's translation is really beautiful, is to talk about the two, not picking on both sides, one side, and conduct yourself that. And so our focus here is to how to conduct. How do we subdue ourselves and help others subdue themselves? And so the Vimalakirti said, this illness is not real. So how should we contemplate on this? If the bodhisattva has, it's like if parents love for their children, they always want the best for them. So it's sometimes they put their expectation onto their kids, and if they don't meet their expectations, sometimes we might feel despair. And this is a benefiting others that has clinging and attachment. So this is the first kind of compassion, because love and hatred are opposite. So for example, myself, I want to benefit my kids or my friends, so I cannot benefit others, the people that I don't like. And so the arousal of the great compassion, is started from delivering sentient beings who are in contact with you or have causes conditions with you. And so we have to observe ourselves whether we have arisen, the great compassion has arisen, and so nevertheless we have to start from people, those who are close to us. And so the second portion is one has to be rid of any bindings before they can help other people. If I have great compassion for sentient beings, then one would cause one to be tired, and we might be easily fall into the turning minds of the sentient beings. So if or the other point is, if we ourselves are bound, how can we relieve others from being bound? You know, if it's the same way. So how do we help others? The first, we have to see the compassionate mind, and then secondly, we have to be able to deliver ourselves, then we can deliver others. Deliver ourselves, then we can deliver others. So we all have things that bound us. How do we relieve ourselves from those the bindings? So we have to learn from the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. So in the DDM center, there we have three statue of Avalokiteshvara. The first one is on the mountain who is sitting, and the other two is sitting in on the chair listening to sentient beings, and the third one is the welcoming Bodhisattva, is as if, you know, he or she is walking forward and welcoming you. And this statue is facing sentient beings. So the two sides of Avalokiteshvara is talked about in the Lotus Sutra. The Avalokiteshvara observe that the sentient beings, whatever they need, he will deliver them in that way. If he needs to be a teacher, or if he needs to be a king to deliver the sentient beings, he will manifest themselves as that. So this is and Avalokiteshvara's other side is in the Pure Sutra. We talked about the seeing the five skandhas are empty in the Heart Sutra. So we see that all phenomenon is empty and ethereal, so that you will not have any attachment or clinging. So if Bodhisattva is helping sentient beings everywhere, is he going to be really tired all the time? If it's us, then we will be tired very quickly. But Avalokiteshvara is the reason that he will not be tired. It's because he has two sides. Firstly, that he sees that the sentient beings outside of a mind are created from causes and condition, and it's a notion of things, and it have no intrinsic nature. And it observes that the inside the mind is also the same, and so inside and outside are the same, and it's one and not others, not dual. So we talked about the same body and great compassion, and that is to say the sentient beings inside our mind and outside of our mind is the same. They are all created by causes and conditions, and are simply just notions of things, and they're not real. And Avalokiteshvara, does he have to work very hard to deliver sentient beings outside of the mind? Because you don't have to, because he knows that what's outside is the same as what's inside. He sees that the sentient beings within his mind is suffering from greed, hatred, and delusion, and is suffering. It's just as if he himself is suffering. So Avalokiteshvara is simply just being himself. He's simply just delivering the sentient beings inside his mind, because to him, the outside and inside is the same. So if when we say that Avalokiteshvara is listening to sentient beings, who is he listening to? He's listening to both the inside and the outside. So it's like if we bite our tongue, we comfort it, as if it's our own. It's the same. And additionally, all the sentient beings are not actually there. So if they're not actually there, so when you are trying to deliver sentient beings, would you really care about the results? Then you wouldn't, because it's all an illusion. So even though they are suffering, but it is all an illusion. But for us ordinary people, when we're helping others, it's different. And when we think that, oh, they are poor, they need help, then we help them. But people who are helpless, but they also have a negative side. Sometimes they might not take your help, or they might hurt you, in fact. So we may get hurt in that process. So furthermore, when I'm helping living beings, and living beings are angry towards you, then you yourself may also arise with anger. And that's even worse, where we ourselves are developing these negative emotions. And why is that? Because we think that they are real, and that's why it's easy for us to get angry, or we may get hurt in our process of helping sentient beings. So we have to learn Avalokiteshvara, the two sides of Avalokiteshvara. So following that, in Vimalakirti Sutra, when we talk about the bounds of a bodhisattva, we'll talk about that more. So when we know these two sides, we'll understand this better once we look at the sutra. So the bodhisattvas, they're supposed to have a lot of wisdom and merit, right? So why are they still bound? And so Vimalakirti said that there's two wisdom, and they are the prajna and expedient means. So first, we want to look at the liberation of bondage of bodhisattva. So the first bondage of the bodhisattva is the clinging to dhyana, and because of course the bodhisattva will have a deep experience, in their practice. So if there's any kind of joy that comes out of that dhyana practice, then they might cling to that, and so it might be made to be difficult for you to help sentient beings. For example, someone who is practicing meditation, they might have a very deep experience, and that would lead them to not wanting to leave that experience. So how do we liberate ourselves from that? We have to liberate them with expedient methods. So this is the first one. And the second one is wisdom not supported by expedient method. And because I don't have expedient methods, right? But I only have wisdom. So this is an imbalance. So because I don't have expedient means, so then I give it expedient means. Well, so what is no expedient means? That means you have great compassion. And that means that I can only deliver those who are near me, or I can only do the methods that's fixed. And So I cannot use expedient means that are suitable for the living beings. So I can only, if I can only deliver those who are near me, if those who are away far from me, then I cannot deliver them. How do we fix that? If we observe living beings more closely and we try to meet more people, then we can we can develop that. So this is the first, and so actually whatever if we cannot be like Avalokiteshvara, then we're limited in that way. So the third one is expedient methods without wisdom. So you have you have done a lot of merits and helping sentient beings, but you yourself still carry a lot of greed, hatred, and wrong view, and you don't have a lot of wisdom. Even though you meet a lot of people, you did a lot of good deeds, but you yourself still is unwilling to transfer the merit of yourselves to other sentient to everyone. So you still have greed, and you might have hatred, and you might have delusion. So you won't. You're holding on to your merit, and so this is the lack of wisdom within yourself. So still, you're still doing all the good expedient means, but you still have to be far away from greed, hatred, and delusion. So the sutra is very simple, right? But when we're actually implementing this, it's really difficult. But it gives us a direction in this, which side are we imbalanced at. So if whichever side you're more bound, then you make that part better.
Okay, just now we talk about Bodhisattva's bondage and liberation. Well, if you're clinging to dhyana, you would live among living beings with the knowledge of expedient methods. If you have wisdom, if your wisdom is without the support of expedient means, then you would need to have wisdom supported by expedient means methods. Okay, all right. Well, after talking about subduing ourselves and others, let's briefly address manifesting the Bodhisattva path. Well, when we're no longer attached to all these dualities, these constructs, which we treat all these things as real, as good or bad, sage or worldly. If we're no longer attached to these duality, that is actually practicing the true Bodhisattva path. What the focus is, when we're practicing the Bodhisattva path, the essential way is to get rid of duality. Well, this is following subduing ourselves and others, which is to practicing non-duality. And we need to enter the state of non-duality to be able to achieve effects. Working on the causes would be to subduing ourselves, subduing others, delivering others, and only after we experience non-duality can we really obtain the good results. Next, we'll talk about the structure of the sutra. Okay, so that's so much for chapter 5. And now coming to the third lecture. In the third lecture, we're going to talk about chapters 6 to 8. Hopefully we can cover all of them in today's lecture. The 6th chapter, okay. Well, in the 5th chapter, we talked about Manjushri's call on Vimalakirti, which was indirectly talking about practicing Bodhisattva path from asking about illness. And we also talked about how to practice Bodhisattva path in order to by subduing ourselves and others, and then entering the non-duality stage. And most of that was conducted through conversations or dialogues. No matter it was manifestations after conversations or before conversations, it does have this structure in it. In chapter 5, it was about mostly conducted in the conversations about illness. And the next chapter, it was more about manifestation of the superpower to really show the transcendental power, which is a verification that is not limited to just talking about it, but also to show you the results. Okay, now chapter 6 is the inconceivable liberation. Well, since everyone is already in Vimalakirti's room, then people start to think about, well, since we've been standing for so long, why are we not giving a sit? And because of this, Vimalakirti started to manifest these transcendental superpowers to show how the different sizes can accommodate each other and all these inconceivable phenomena. So now let's take a look at the structure of the 6th chapter. First of all, let's talk about the meaning of inconceivable. What does inconceivable actually mean? Well, a part of it is to know using our mind. And then a second half of it is to use language to discuss, to talk about things. And that's called yi in Chinese. So 可思可议 means that we have to use our minds and language to be able to think and discuss. So inconceivable means things that cannot be really conceived using our minds or discussed using our language. Well, for ordinary human beings, no matter how much knowledge that we have, how knowledgeable we are, how amazing things are, we can still think about them and use language to be able to talk about them, or even algorithms in mathematics to be able to illustrate them. Well, for Sravakas in the small vehicle, even though they're no longer within the 3 realms and are no longer bounded to birth and death, the basic idea is the 4 noble truths. Is the cause and effects, and which can still be conceived. However, for Mahayana, since the idea is without duality, not falling into either side, that means it's no longer clinging to language or thinking to be able to measure them. And that's called no longer clinging to relativity or the 2 sides. So that cannot be conceived. It's not only that it cannot be thought about or talked about using language. It's not falling into either side. It's showing all these usage, these functions, these skillful uses after entering the state of non-duality. Okay, now the structure of this chapter can be broken down into 5 chapters. The origin of this chapter is about Sariputra thinking about seats and hoping that they could be offered a seat. And after Vimalakirti scolded Sariputra that you're here to seek the word you're in the quest for Dharma, not in the quest of a seat. And then he asked Master Shuri, what are the most noble seats in the world? And Master Shuri said, well, in Sumeru, which is far away there, and in there are the grand line thrones that are the noblest seats in the world. And all these great grand line thrones can actually be fit in Vimalakirti's room, which is pretty small. And everyone felt not crowded at all. It was completely inconceivable. Because we can conceive the idea that the small can be fit in the big area, but not vice versa. So at the beginning, Vimalakirti talked about this inconceivable idea about inconceivable liberation, how to define inconceivable liberation. And then he addressed what is the appearance of inconceivable liberation. For example, how can all these dharma of people, what we hear, we can only hear using our ears and we can see using our eyes. But this dharma can be reused. Well, for example, fire, if it enters to our body, we will be burned. We will be suffering from it. But he talked about this idea that even fire enters into our body, we can still be okay. So the idea is regardless of time and space, change, or usage, or our mental ideas or thoughts, regardless of all these phenomena, it can be inconceivable. Well, because Vimalakirti talked about the inconceivably liberated Bodhisattva, so everyone was really praising about this phenomena and thinking that the Shravakas cannot achieve this state. Well, even demons Maras could not interfere with you if you're practicing the inconceivable liberation. So Vimalakirti started to address that all these Maras are actually manifestations of this inconceivable liberation. So the idea is the inconceivable liberation is not limited to the state of Bodhisattvas, but also to Maras, because they are also the manifestations of these Bodhisattvas, which also transcends our common conceptualization of inconceivable liberation. So now let's see. About, sorry, Putra, thinking about seats. Vimalakirti asked him, why are you here? Are you here for the Dharma or for the seat? And of course, Sariputra said, well, I'm here for the Dharma. And then Vimalakirti said to him that he who searches for the Dharma does not even cling to his body and life, still less to a seat. So why did Vimalakirti want to show this room without seats? Because he wanted to give this idea that there is no perspective or position, because if we're not clinging to either side, that means we don't have any perspectives or positions, and any place, anywhere can be our perspective and position. I'm not sure if you guys have been to this Ryuanji temple in Kyoto, Japan. Well, this is the yard of the temple where there were 14 stones in the yard. Well, seemingly, well, you can see all these stones placed on these sands or the fake mountains used, built by the stones, but there is a meaning behind it. Well, if you have a perspective or a position, no matter which perspective you take, you'll never be able to see the whole picture of the 15 stones in total. As long as you have a perspective or position, and then you count how many stones there are, you will be able to count 14 stones at most, because you would be blinded by something given a specific perspective. And then you wouldn't be able to get the whole picture, because well, if there is another perspective, then you'll be able to see a different picture. So the meaning behind this code no seats is to get rid of relativity. So no perspectives or no positions. This also kind of demonstrates Sariputra as an ignorant figure. Next is the chapter on the method of seeking Dharma. Well, here is the idea that those who seek the Dharma should not be attached to seeking Dharma from Buddha, Dharma, and living beings, etc., etc. So why is that a famous quote? Because there is a Gong'an from Chang. I'm not sure if you guys know Chan Master Huang Bo, his story with Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Well, when he was working as a monk at a temple, and at that time, Tang Xuanzong had to stay away from, let's see how to put it. He had to become a monk and get away from the political sphere, and then became a monk. So he saw Chan Master and then asked him, what does that mean? Those who seek the Dharma should not be attached to seeking Dharma from Buddha Dharma. So what are you seeking essentially? And then the Chan Master asked him, do you want to know about it? And Tang Xuanzong answered, well, I do want to know about it. And then he slapped him in the face, and he was very astonished. And he was very angry about it and said angrily, why are you doing this to me? And then the Chan Master continued his practice. So Tang Xuanzong asked again, what do you mean by this idea? Those who seek the Dharma should not be attached to seeking Dharma from Buddha and Dharma. What are you seeking for? And then the Chan Master asked him to come over again, and then gave him another slap in the face. And he was getting angry seriously. Why are you being so rude? Why are you hitting me? This is so rude. And the Chan Master gave him another slap. So 3 slaps in total. Well, how come you talk about rudeness and politeness in this place? Aren't these 2 ideas opposite to one another? Aren't they dual concepts? Because there can only be rudeness when there is politeness. What is this place? This is a place that is not dual. So this nature is the idea of non-duality that has nothing to do with relativity. If the nature is non-dual, then how come you still have these concepts of politeness and rudeness? Where there must be a reason why you do this. So if you think about all these ideas, then the Chan Master thought maybe giving him a slap would help him, enlighten him to think through. But after 3 slaps, he was still unable to comprehend. So after Emperor Tang Xuanzong became the emperor, and Chan Master Huang Bo passed away, the governor at that time invited Emperor Xuanzong of Tang to give a name to the Chan Master called Chu Xing, venerable Chu Xing, which is venerable rude actions. Well, you cannot name him like this because there are reasons behind this name, because he was trying to help you cut off this duality, this concepts of duality, right? He was helping you to enter the state of non-duality. It was you who were not able to understand. So Tang Xuanzong changed his name to Duanji, which is to cutting off the 3 times, which was present, past, and the future. And after you're cut off from the past, the present, and future, you will be able to enter non-duality.
So we know a very famous monk from Thailand called Ajahn Chah, and he's a very his methods of Chan is very much similar to ours. He often says this story, and before him there's another monk called Ajahn Man, and so a lot of people want to follow Ajahn Man and to become a monk. So one person was very devoted, and he was very diligent, and he sold all his property, and he wanted to leave all the wealthy people, and he in fact he took all his family and wanted to followed Ajahn Mun, and after that he went to India to visit all the Buddhist sites, and after that he wanted to come to Ajahn Mun to be close to him. So after he came back from India, and when he sat at Ajahn Mun's uh, room, he saw that Ajahn Mun is chewing on these seeds, and talking to the monk in a kind of a cheerful way. And when they're laughing, his mouth opens and you can see the remnants of the seed, and it's very not unsightly. And so, and he has a thought idea that monks should have a certain kind of behavior, and Ajahn Mun is not the kind of image that he has in mind when he thinks about a Dharma teacher. And so he 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 let go of the idea of following Ajahn Mun. And so if when someone who's so determined to follow him, at the sight of an unsightly smile, he let go of his his desire to follow him. And why is that? Because he has a very strong desire in his mind, and as long as you have something that you seek, then it is not the real it is not the real seeking of Dharma. So oftentimes, for when we're people who when we're for practitioners, we often have a fixed view of what practicing should look like. So once you have a fixed view, it will be really difficult for you to get real benefits from the Dharma practice. So following that, we'll talk about the third chapter, and this is explaining the inconceivable names. It's a little bit more complicated. And so this is Vimalakirti's inquiring mantra series. When you're traveling among the Buddha lands, and there's a Buddha. He is a very, very tall, so his lion seat is also very big. So Vimalakirti uses supernatural power to brought all those things into the room, and all the Bodhisattvas were able to head onto the seat, and people who are just learning, they're trying to climb up to it, but the seats are too small, and they cannot get up to it. And so Vimalakirti said that you have to bow, and then you can climb up to it. So the Shravakas have to bow to the Bodhisattvas, only then can they get up to the seats. So it's to present that the Bodhisattva path is precious and is superior, and it, if all these seats were out in the this is a very inconceivable scene. And Vimalakirti said, yes, there's a name called inconceivable liberation. So this is the main theme of the sutra, and this manifested in this chapter, and that is the liberation of the Bodhisattva. So here, in this sixth chapter, explains the name of the sutra. And what is it trying to show? It's trying to show that the Bodhisattva path is more precious than the Sravaka path. So the main theme of this chapter is that Bodhisattva can enter into the non-duality and show the inconceivable. So how do you get into into the non-dual? You have to deliver yourself and deliver others, and only then can you manifest such inconceivable scene. So you have to follow the emptiness, intrinsic nature. Everything is within the Dharma Dhatu, and it's within this realm. The big and small are equal, and everything is equal. And because ordinary people are lost and deluded, and they are attached to notions and names, and including the two Dharma path, it's still, you're still cannot enter into the inconceivable liberation. And this is what this chapter is talking about. So so we're about to talk about what you can do with once you've entered the inconceivable nature. So who are those that do not follow the Dharma? So a lot of things, that's the things that you cannot change by adding or removing. And the layperson asked the master Matsu, and so the master said, once you've able to devour the entire West River, then I'll talk to you about it. So we'll see how Vimalakirti responded. So he said, he started to explain, he said that if a bodhisattva is liberated and he can put a great and extensive Mount Sumeru in a mustard seed, in a single mustard seed. What is that? That's like a seed of a mustard plant. So that Mount Sumeru can be fitted into the tiny seed and not lose anything. And how is that possible? But that's because the Mount Sumeru is empty, and the mustard seed is also empty. So we'll explain a little bit more here. This is a chart. We'll start from the point of a dependent origination. So the precondition is that it's all skillful use. You have to first understand that the intrinsic nature is empty. So how do we understand that? We have to first understand it from a dependent origination. So you have to understand because dependent origination is because all the causes and condition bring to this moment. It's because all the cause and condition combined together cannot emerge by themselves. It's what kind of causes and condition. They are all the causes and condition that are not myself. So here it says that the self is not comprised of not self. I cannot born myself. The seed cannot born itself. It cannot. It has to be needs all the causes and conditions, just like Mount Sumeru or rice are the same as well. It needs a lot of causes and conditions to make that happen. So when we say the self is comprised of not self, it means that yourself is comprised of all things that exist. It's coming from the perspective of existence. So Mount Sumeru is just a name. The mustard seed is just a name. It's just presented as a notion, but its meaning includes everything. It includes everything that's outside of myself. So myself includes everything, and if you includes everything, so that means then we are all interconnected and intercontained. And if we start from the causes and conditions. So for the second entry point is we have to enter into the intrinsic nature of it, because everything is coming together of causes and condition. That means that there is no intrinsic nature in it, because it needs all the causes and condition. There is nothing that is real. So we say that this is empty in nature. You are empty in nature, your roots is root empty, and they are empty. So that means we're all equal, right? And we say that the equality is because intrinsic nature is empty. So this is first we talked about using the false existence and the emptiness nature. Combine those two if both things are empty, And the moment that you see the phenomena at that moment itself is empty. You don't have to wait until the causes and conditions has dissolved, and then you can say that it is empty. The moment itself is empty. And so therefore the phenomenon itself is also empty. So going from intrinsic nature is empty to the phenomenon is empty. So if this matter and this other matter, if we want to compare them, because both of them their phenomenon are empty in nature, and therefore they are mutually unobstructed among each other. So when we want to talk about this, we always have to start talking. If we want to talk about mutual obstructed among phenomena, we always have to start from the dependent origination and the intrinsic nature. So so therefore, because the phenomenon is empty, both matter, when they including all the phenomenon around it, they all have their individual causes and conditions. Both of them have their own cause and condition, but they can be both equal and not be obstructing each other. So is this a little confusing to you? Because for us to be able to understand, we have to use some logic to look at this from layer to layer. So we want to see the roots of it. If we start from the emptiness of intrinsic nature to the phenomenon emptiness, so therefore that they are both mutually unobstructed. Then therefore we say the mutually unobstructed among phenomena. So when the person asked Wang Po that when all the phenomena are presented in front of you, then what do you do? And Wang Po said that black is not white, yellow is not green. All phenomenon each have their own place. It's not my business. And because they all have their own causes and condition, what does it have to do with me? But I clearly know white is not black, yellow is not green. They all have their own place. And this further, we don't have to be attached to it. If you can understand this concept, then we can use this to explain the wondrous use after one has entered the non-duality. So when we say that we're mutually obstructive, is like when you say milk and tea, it becomes milk tea. So milk and tea, they both are their own dharma. When you put it together, they don't obstruct each other, right? So for people who like milk tea, if you add boba in there, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with that, right? They're not obstructing each other. Even from an intrinsic nature point of view, it's also unobstructed. So if we can understand that, then we can know that not only the sea, not only can seas include the great Mount Sumeru, even a tiny little pore in your body, you can envelop the entire body of water of the ocean. Because the pores on your body, is it intrinsic in nature? Yes. And is the ocean so? Yes. So they can contain and be within each other. From here, what are the inconceivable appearances here? So we have.
Okay, so the different perspectives are kind of simplified in here. Well, if we follow the interpretations of the authoritative figures, it could be really complicated. So I kind of explained them in simplified terms in here. Well, the first idea is about different sides that are compatible, which means that there's no obstacle in space. So how to manifest this idea? That is having the Sumeru within a mustard seed, or having the pore accommodating oceans. in which the two kind of don't interfere with one another. Well, even some, like the fish who are swimming in the oceans, are they going to be squeezed? No, they still swim at will freely, naturally. So that's how this was manifested. The second idea about traveling at will, what is that? It's about, well, if you're not moving or moving, you can just move at your will. Well, remember, like if we throw a well and we have all the clay, we can make it into different shapes, right? Well, it will not be attached to it, and then you can detach it and then move away, right? There is the silent no motion, and there is the motion within it. You can do it freely at your will. Well, the world is like a clay, right? And then you can enter the world and then exit. And every living being in this world, even though they're moving, but they do not feel they're moving. For example, if you're riding a lift, if it's accelerating, you kind of feel the motion. But if it's moving at the same speed, then you do not feel that you're actually moving. The same idea with riding on a train, even though you're traveling very fast, but still you do not feel that you're moving. So that kind of breaks this idea about motion. The third idea, time is relative. If you look at it from the perspective of time, Bodhisattva thinks that if you are suffering for just one kalpa, even though that's just a glimpse, the inconceivably liberated Bodhisattva, he can shorten it to 7 days. Well, if the sentient beings are enjoying their lives, are being very happy for 7 days, then the Bodhisattva can extend it to as long as 1 kalpa. So time is no longer abstracted for Bodhisattvas. So time can be extended and shortened. So that means this kind of not clinging or detached from the objective and subjective concept of time. So think of the idea about the illusions of wealth and glory. After that, you fall asleep for so long, but then you feel like it's just a glimpse. Well, a monk enters into the meditation concentration when he's no longer in his meditation. Actually, it has passed time, a lot of time has passed, but he doesn't feel that length of time. So it kind of breaks the idea about the relativity of time or the concept of time. The fourth idea is the operation at will. So as a inconceivably liberated bodhisattva, if you look at everything within a perspective, it's kind of still restricted, right? So if you look at the world within a block, you're kind of restricted to what you see from that shot, right? Well, we know that fire and water have their own functions, but the bodhisattva kind of breaks all these abstractedness between all these concepts and can accommodate the fires and water in the chiliocosm within his body, but not being affected by these fires or the waters. Or even for us, it's inconceivable. Well, he also mentioned that the inconceivably liberated bodhisattva can see the manifestations and the skillful uses of all the Buddhas through a very small hole, from a pore that the bodhisattva can see the manifestations of all these skillful uses of Buddhas. And finally, is change at will. Well, for the bodhisattva, he can show himself as a tiger or as a bodhisattva in whatever form. Well, he can, and also including the sound of Dharma, he can transform every sound into the sound of Dharma, which means that he has this function or the ability to master all the changes. And for the Bodhisattva who has experienced inconceivable liberation, all these useful powers of this Bodhisattvas are beyond our imagining. So how can we kind of try to understand it or comprehend it? Well, remember that we have the cell phones, right? Within a small cell phone, there are so many functions within it. You can check emails, you can search, you can see the whole world just using this small cell phone. You're able to find everything that you want. Well, there is an old saying that once you have read numerous books, your writing can flow naturally, which implies the same meaning. Well, if you have so much knowledge, then you can answer basically any questions that anyone asks you. Which means that you almost have all these books in your body, right? And then your writing can flow naturally because you have all this knowledge within you. Well, this is how ordinary human beings kind of illustrate the ideas of big and small accommodating each other. Well, recently, we know that the Olympic Games has been happening in Japan. Let's use an example of running. For that very 1 second of people who are running to try to get the champion of the competition, that 1 second of achievement was the result of accumulation of years and years of practice and efforts. Maybe this athlete has been hurt, suffered a lot from the practice, and all these efforts are shown in this 1 second of achievement. So this 1 second is never this 1 second alone, but also indicates all these efforts, these struggles, these experiences that have been devoted to this 1 second achievement. We can see eternity in a glimpse. And within a glimpse, we can see the efforts that you have devoted to this achievement in your entire life. And a long-term kalpa can be converted into a short-term one. That kind of helps us to understand this idea about the powers or the manifestations of bodhisattvas who have obtained inconceivable liberation. So now let's take a 5-minute break. After our break, we'll continue with the talk on this chapter. Thank you very much, Venerable. Let's have a 5-minute break. So please be back at 3:08. And for our brothers and sisters in Taiwan, please be back at 11 a.m. let's continue the second half of the lecture today. Thank you very much. Well, next, we talk about another turning point of the story. Well, this is the state that these bodhisattvas can achieve, but Sravakas don't really have that good seeds. We're not able to achieve this state, almost meaning that the root has been hurt and broken. It's almost like you're blind and you're not able to see the appearances, the external world. So they were not only praising Vimalakirti or the actions of the bodhisattvas who have obtained inconceivable liberation, but also feel really sorry for themselves and feel very pitiful. So all these bodhisattvas who have practiced and obtained an inconceivable liberation, Vimalakirti kind of responded that for all these maras from 10 directions and immeasurable kalpa, they're actually bodhisattvas who have obtained inconceivable liberation. They have to show themselves as maras to be able to teach sentient beings using expedient methods. So the reason to become a mara is to teach and deliver sentient beings. What kind of sentient beings? Well, the actions of maras is actions against the way, which is to hurt sentient beings, to rob them, to hurt them. There were two kinds of actions against the way. The first is to use actions against the way to teach those whose seeds are not yet planted. So these people always commit crimes and will suffer in the future. So you can hardly use a very gentle way, gentle words, speech to treat them. You'll have to use harsh words to show this cruel side of maras to teach them. So the kind words are no longer helpful for them and not effective in subduing them. So you have to use the maras, the powers of maras, to intimidate them. So we'll talk about in the story to illustrate that point later. So all the sentient beings on the Buddha land, if they commit crimes, do bad things, and afraid of the bad results, they kind of show that these people can be punished and how they are punished. And so that they know that if you commit crimes, you'll be punished in this manner. And in that way, they will be intimidated and no longer commit crimes in the future. So the maras have this power to intimidate the sentient beings, to teach them, because their seeds are not yet planted. And to be able to help them, they're finally able to not plant bad seeds and to kind of be directed towards the virtuous, the kind. The second kind is to use actions against the way to enable those whose seeds are ready to germinate. So this is for those who have really good karma roots and use these kind of actions to test them. For example, some extreme actions can include to beg for food, hands, ears, and nose from these people, because they are sick and they can only get better and recover using the eyes or the ears of others. And once they get it, they just put it on the ground and step on it. Because I need the right eye to recover and you gave me the left eye. So this was a way of testing the sentient beings. And during that time, Sariputra did not pass the test. There were all these stories about sacrificing oneself to be fed to the tiger, or these ideas about to cutting off the all these.
These are all the great bodhisattvas presenting themselves as the Mara, and they're trying to test those great practitioner, they have their very solid practice. And so the second kind of bodhisattva who act against the way, they're trying to help or enable those whose seeds are ready to germinate. So this kind of helping, they can only help those who have the kind of the dragon or elephant great appearance, who are already they're very close to attainment. If you help those who are not, then it's not going to be very effective. You have to hit those who have great achievement, and they will, if you punish them or you hit them, they will achieve great success. But for ordinary people, that's definitely not the case. We're too weak for that. And so all these appearance of Mara or demons is a way that Bodhisattva helps all sentient beings to leave the evil deeds and do good deeds. So this is the story I talked about. It's the King Anala, and and they have to show that very heavy, very difficult, very evil or harsh punishment. And then the boy Sudana asked, like, well, isn't this bad deeds? And and Anala King said, these these sentient beings that I have punished harshly are all illusions that I manifested. So this is the true power of the inconceivable bodhisattva. But these kinds of acts can only be done by great bodhisattvas. We should not think that because we're just an ordinary person, we can do such harsh actions. We cannot follow exactly as the sutra says. Only great bodhisattvas with inconceivable attainment can do that. If we do that ourselves, then we probably will receive punishment. This is another kind of vaccine I want to inject to you guys and make sure you guys don't do this. So we still, for example, the Chief Justice of the United States, his son, he was invited to his son's graduation. He's still Chief Justice John Roberts is still the Chief Justice today. So I'm going to show a talk by him. So he said these words: "I wish you are often treated unfairly." Why? Because only unfair treatment will allow you to understand what is fair. So most people will only realize the importance of fairness when they are treated unfairly. And then he further says, I wish you experience betrayal. I wish you feel lonely. I wish you experience bad luck now and then. I wish your opponents will laugh at you when you fail. I wish you often ignored by others. I wish you experience hardship. Most people in graduation, when they are giving a speech, they say all these nice things. They wish they're successful. They wish they have a smooth career. But he's kind of has a bodhisattva mind. He gives this kind of view that's contradictory or in the opposite way. And at that moment, he asked all the graduates stand up. He doesn't want them to look forward. He actually asked them to look backwards. He wants them to see all his parents behind them. And he's saying that you just graduated. Don't just go forward right away. You have to turn back and see your parents who enabled you to be who you are today. And then when they sit back down and look front at the Chief Justice, then he said these harsh words on the page. And only when you get betrayed, then you realize what is important to you. I want you to feel lonely. and only when you know what loneliness feel like, you don't take your friendship for granted. I wish you experienced bad luck, and only then can you realize that a lot of the things are only enabled by a lot of causes and conditions. The success of anything is not just up to you. And likewise, the failure of anything is not singly caused by the other. It is caused by a lot of things together. So any kind of failure should not be a shame at all, and success should not be praised. And so only when you experience this kind of bad luck will you be able to realize this. And likewise, I wish your opponents will laugh at you when you fail. It's like, he wants you to realize the kind of sportsmanship that a lot of athletes should have. Another one is often they wish you get ignored by others, so you know the importance of listening to others. I wish you experience hardship, so then you realize all the difficult times and that you can grow in the time of hardship. So these are the things that we can experience ourselves. We cannot be like the inconceivable liberated bodhisattvas, but we can still experience the preciousness of going against the way. So this is called the Bao Wang 3 Samadhi talk. So it's a master's writing. Do not seek the body without illness when healthy agreed desires are easy to arise. And I do not seek the smooth sailing of worldly affairs if I will bring about arrogance and extravagance. And do not seek the hindrance of mind, for your learning will not be steady and may be hastily. You do wish to not have evil temptation or reactions, because if you do not have obstructions or temptation, then you will not be able to show the strength of your vow. So likewise, here it's all showing all the adverse conditions that help us cultivate the good characters of ourselves. So this is just another sharing from me. So the 6th chapter is conclude. So from the 5th chapter, going from subduing oneself to others, and when they have entered non-duality, and the chapter 6 manifests all the effects of the achievements. So the chapter 5 is cultivating the cause, right? It's pointing out that the bodhisattva needs to subdue one and others. So you need both wisdom and expedient means. You need and using the 32 ways to conclude the chapter. So once you've concluded the cultivating of causes, then the chapter 6, the Vimalakirti manifests the wondrous use of the inconceivable liberation. So going into chapter 7, 8, and 9, and 10, we'll see how. So the chapter 7, the chapter 7, 8, and 9 is a direct explanation, whereas chapter 5 and 6 are indirect explanations. So chapter 7, to downward and transform sentient beings, you need wisdom and great compassion. For chapter 8, to go upward and seek Buddha path, you need wisdom and expedient mean. To be in a middle way and not non-dual, and to conclude in chapter 9. So this is the structure of these chapters. In chapter 5 is cultivating the cause, and chapter 6 is manifesting the effect. So 7, 8, and 9 chapter are also cultivating the causes, with a non-dual chapter on chapter 9, and then in the end chapter 10 is also manifesting the effect. So Vimalakirti shows up in chapter 5, right? So from 5 to 10 has the same structure. It starts from indirect explanation and going to direct explanation, and the result is always a direct manifestation. So the structure is something that we can study. And so let's go into chapter 7, looking at living beings. So this is so Vimalakirti directly explaining the Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva's life work. So so how does a Bodhisattva delivers? How do I include the sentient beings? If the Bodhisattva cannot really see the sentient beings for what they are, how can I, or the Bodhisattva, give the right medicine for them? So if I don't see them clearly, you might end up hurting them in the end. So first, so what is this? So we first have to see clearly what sentient beings are. So I'm going to skip this page. We're going to go directly to here. So looking at living beings, the structure of this chapter is how do I deliver sentient beings? So first, I have to get to know sentient beings. I have to first truly know what they are, the conditions of the sentient. Just like if you want to help someone else, you have to first know them and understand them. Likewise, the first question is, how should Bodhisattva look at sentient beings or living beings? And then so following that, there's a whole series of discussion. So this is a conversation between Vimalakirti and Manjusri. And so they're kind of debating the Dharma, right? So they're Dharmating, they're using a logical way to look at the sentient beings. So in the second part is where the goddess shows up. The goddess there's a discourse between the goddess and the Vimalakirti. So this is different. This is not using logic. This is using the phenomenon to talk about it. So to understanding the difference between male, female, time, long or short, using all these different perspectives to have a discourse to explain and to show how to deliver sentient beings. So for example, I can say that, for example, the first half is more logical, from the emptiness, from perspective of emptiness to observe sentient beings, using emptiness as an expedient means. So the second part, the goddess, is using the phenomenon or the matter to manifest, and it's also it's also talking about it from the perspective of existence. So the first half is very much focused on emptiness, and the second half is focused on existence. So both of these complement each other. The first is by Vimalakirti's discourse, and the second is the goddess. You all have heard of the story, the goddess showing flowers, right? So this comes out of this chapter 7. And so we'll see how should Bodhisattva look at living beings. I have to show this step by step. So how does Bodhisattva see sentient beings? The Bodhisattva should look at beings like an illusion that does at. So we might initially think that how they think of very, very concrete ways to help sentient beings, but the inconceivable liberated Bodhisattva should see Bodhisattva first from a perspective of illusion. They first have to see the true nature of sentient being is empty, is not real. It is like an illusion, like painting. So we have to. So why do we have to see sentient beings like illusion or like paintings? So following that, the Manjusri says, if you see the sentient beings like illusion, then how do you have compassionate mind towards them? If they're all illusionary and it's an illusion, then how can one have compassion? Have you ever thought of this question? It's a great question. How do we do that?
Well, he said that you can use compassion. So at the beginning, well, because all sentient beings do not know that they are illusionary. Therefore, they have all these fixations and attachments. Because at the very beginning, they did not see it very clearly. So the nature of delivering sentient beings is to help them see themselves as illusionary, and thus they won't be having any vexations anymore. And that's true compassion. That's how the sutra goes. So the four immeasurable minds is to really deliver sentient beings and mingle with the living beings. Well, the living beings are in the cycle of birth and death. So shouldn't Bodhisattvas also mingle with all these living beings in this cycle? So Manjusri asked, well, if those Bodhisattvas who are in the cycle of birth and death, who are delivering the sentient beings, how can they get rid of the scareness of life and death? So the four immeasurable minds will be helping others, and then there's also the part of affecting themselves. So at the very beginning, they see the sentient beings as empty and have all these compassion for the sentient beings, because they have to enter the cycle of life and death to deliver sentient beings. How can they get rid of this scareness of life and death? And that is the actions to benefit oneself. And the second half is the goddess showering flowers. How was she going to deliver sentient beings? And this was the debate with the Sariputra about shaking off the flowers on the body. So because all these Saravaks cannot wear flowers or wear perfume, this is not in alignment with the Dharma. And then they continue this discussion how the flowers are not in alignment with a Dharma, or is it because you have this idea of the mind of differentiation? And the debate continues about if you're so great, you're so powerful, why don't you change the nature of your body? It's a very interesting debate. It also has this idea of manifesting this state, this atmosphere to all the readers. So when they're talking about sentient beings, they're actually talking about nature, essentially. One is from the logical, rationalization, and the other is from the appearances. And so one is more focused on the empty nature, and the other is more focused on existence and attachment to the flowers. So now let's continue. Well, a bodhisattva should look at living beings as an illusionist does at the illusionary man, and like a wise man looking at the moon's reflection in water. The first property is illusionary, right? Like a man looking at the moon's reflection in water, at bubbles on the water. Well, the moon in the water, is it shown? Yes, we can see it. We can actually see something in the water. We can actually see the bubbles on the water, even though they would distinguish. So we say it's like illusionary, it's as illusionary, but we don't say it is illusionary. So when I say it's illusionary, I'm not saying that it does not exist at all, because I'm still able to see this mirrored image of the moon in the water. I'm still able to see the bubbles on the water. It's just, are they real? The question is, are they real? Are they the nature? No, they're not the truth. So that's why I say it's illusionary. but I'm not saying that it's illusion and non-existent at all. So if we're talking about it's totally an illusion, then we would fall to the side of non-existence. So let's take another example. If you're looking at a mirror, is the image in the mirror, is that your face? Well, that's the image in the mirror. It's not your real face. But if it's not my real face, is it not existent? No, it actually exists in and shows itself in the mirror. So it's not like it's existing as it is appearing in the mirror. It's because someone is looking at the mirror. So the image that we see is not real, but it's also not non-existent. It can be experienced by you physically, actually. So that's manifesting from the perspective of worldly truth, this illusionary idea. The second perspective has to do with unreal or not substantial. For example, at the empty core of a banana tree, at a flash of lightning, like lightning, right? It can be stopped. Like the fifth element, the sixth aggregate, and the 19th realm of sense at the tracks of birds and flying in the sky. Well, we know there are 5 aggregates. Is there a 6th aggregate? No. We know there are 18 realms of sense. Is there a 19th realm? No. Well, do rabbits have horns? Well, all these horns are imagined by human beings. They don't exist at all. So this unreal or not substantial is trying to describe that the nature is not existent. The self-nature is empty, is non-existent. So all these analogies and examples can be divided into 2 categories. One is illusionary and the other is unreal or not substantial. This idea of non-substantial is that you can see a building very vaguely in the fog, but it's not existent. That's because of all this refraction and reflection, refraction, all the imagination that we have, we're able to see it. But if we take a step forward, we can see the image, but it's not real. When we're actually in that position, it's no longer there. It's like a mirage. Like if you stand right beside a rainbow, you're not able to see it. That means it's unreal. For example, if you can see all these classics about self-nature or empty intrinsic nature, the analogies can be divided into these categories. If they're talking about we can feel it using our senses, but it's illusionary, then it's this first category, right? Like seeing the mirror in the water or seeing the bubbles on the water. If it's describing something that's not existent at all, like a female without a womb can deliver a baby, if it's something like that, or the tracks of the birds flying in the sky, if it's not existent, then that falls into the second category, which is absolute truth, and which has to do with empty intrinsic nature. Or if you look at all these classics about prajna, all these analogies have to do with worldly truth and absolute truth. So all these ideas about worldly truth and empty intrinsic nature. Well, if we see all these phenomena as illusionary, what's the benefit in perceiving that as illusionary? Well, just like Vimalakirti Bodhisattva, about seeing the nature of the 5 aggregates as empty, then they can just focus on delivering the sentient beings and not being exhausted or tired at all. They can experience all these sufferings and they do not follow all these vexations, this greed, hatred, and delusion of all sentient beings. Well, for the first step, it's already very difficult for us, right? We see the others as real. When you hate them, when you want to benefit them, our ordinary individuals would see them as something real, right? So we cannot see them or perceive them as illusionary, which is already very challenging for all of us. But the second benefit is we will be able to cut off our greed, hatred, delusions on all these negative emotions, because it's illusionary, so it's like a dream. So when you wake up from your dream, you'll be able to cut off all these greed, hatred, and delusion. You would be able to understand these are the flow of the causes and conditions. So I'm sure that every one of you has experienced that if you hate someone, then everything that he does, you feel is very annoying. And you will feel like it's a very annoying person. But if you calm down and you look at this person using a different perspective, different mindset, and then you will see this person differently. And we can still call this as illusionary. This is the image that we impose on them, that we impose this differentiation idea onto these images that we have about these person. So if we have the right view about viewing them as empty, then we wouldn't be able to have all these ideas of duality. We won't be able to impose them on this person. This is the greatest benefit. Okay, so this is the first. So next we come to this question, how to cultivate the mind of compassion when we perceive all living beings as empty. Well, the Sangha group that we have, in the Sangha group, we have the one day, which is Monday, for the male Sangha to listen to Venerable Guoxing's lectures. And we used our interactions to kind of conduct this activity. We read the sutras and then we share our reflections about the sutras, and we have this Q&A session with Venerable Guoxing. Venerable Guoxing has this idea that when we look at all these external environments, two mistakes arise. The first mistake is we treat them as human beings. We treat them as substantial, real individuals that have their nature. So there is the object and subject. And we use our differentiation and impose on them. So where does this object and subject come from? Well, all these ideas that we have about this external environment. And then we use our next thought to complete our previous thought, which was influenced by the previous thought. So then we have all these this contrast of object and subject. When the thought after the previous thought, and then there's followed another thought, as kind of originally our thought would arise and then disappear. So we have a thought that kind of follows the previous thought, and then that continues. So Venerable Guoxing would say, because we have these two mistakes. The first practice is we cut off this connection between thoughts, because we have all these thoughts that's connected one by another. So, and this combination of subject and object builds on one another continuously. If we cut this connection between subject and object, if we cut off this connection, then we will be able to really see the rising and disappearing of different thoughts itself. So I had this question. Well, if you're cutting off this connection, will it be problematic? Because our food is coming from living beings, our money is coming from all these causes and conditions from all others. Because for our own practice, we cut off this connection Is that problematic? I'm confused about it. How am I going to develop this compassion and then show my gratitude to all the sentient beings?
Because all the benefits I've received is come from the sentient beings. So if I know that I need to repay, and then and yet I still have to cut off this thing, and how do I deliver sentient beings? And so what do you think that the Venerable Guoxing said? He says, "You think you're delivering sentient beings?" Because it's like it's the same, because all the sentient beings are enabling me. When I know that, when I make that connection, I'm trying to deliver sentient beings, I'm trying to repay. But Venerable Guoxing said, all the manifestation of the sentient beings is there to enable me, and to enable you, and they are there to enable you. But we often think that we are often closely related to sentient beings, but actually we're very much just like all in a dream. We're delivering sentient beings in a dream. If we think that the sentient beings are real, then we will have develop the kind of great compassion with love, and that means, like, if those that I can observe, then I will help them. If I don't see them, then I won't help them. And if we have an object in mind, then you will discriminate. And if you discriminate, then you'll be tired, because you cannot continue to do this forever. So Venerable Guoxing said that if you have to cease the connection. You have to what is the benefit of that? Because the benefit is you can deliver sentient beings without an object. If there is a cause and condition there, then do it, then help them. And they are actually in fact, they're actually there to help you to deliver them. So, and then I realized, oh, I was trying, my desire to have connection between me and the sentient beings, that itself is kind of my where I'm seeing sentient beings as real, and then therefore I have that kind of thinking, where in fact the sentient beings in my mind are always enabling me or helping to deliver me. And if I can make that, cut that, and deliver sentient beings without delivering them or seeing them as object, then I can see them as the same body as me. I will not. I can. It can help me stop to discriminate between those who might need more help or less help, or those who are near me or far from me. And at the same time, those sentient beings can help me remove the views of opposing views. And so let's see how we can develop our four measurable minds. So this loving kindness, and compassion, the definition is a little bit different than what we typically know. So, for example, here in loving kindness, it talks about the 29 kinds of loving kindness. So for compassion, it says the merits of the Bodhisattvas are shared with all living beings. It's not my merit. It's shared by all sentient beings. And joy is receiving benefits and feeling joy without regrets. Regardless of how the sentient beings feels, I will have no regrets. And then how about equanimity? Equanimity is bringing merits and fortune without expectation. That means, I do not come with a mind of a want. Whether it's successful or not, I'm just gonna give myself, and this is equanimity. So this kind of definition is different than the typical way. Normally, we might think of here it's defining the four measurable minds from the emptiness and and wisdom. So 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 these four measurable mind is heavy on emptiness and wisdom, and it's heavy on letting go of the attachment to those actions. So So in order to deliver to bring informed measurable mind, then you have to do it within birth and death, right? So in birth and death, then there was fear. So what should he rely on? His fear and death. So on what should they rely on in his fear of birth and death? Then Vimalakirti said he should rely on the power of Tathagata's moral merit. And Manjushri asked, what should he do to win the support of the power of the Tathagata's moral merit? So then Vimalakirti said that you have to abide in the Buddha's moral merits. So Vimalakirti asked again, then what should he wipe out of in order to liberate sentient beings? Then Vimalakirti said that you have to remove their vexation, right? So you can start to get the idea. Then he says, how should he do to wipe out the kilesa? Then one should uphold right mindfulness. We can say right mindfulness is like if every single mind and thought is constantly with the Buddha's inconceivable nature. So then what is the right mindfulness? That is to advocate the unborn and undying. So what is this describing? It is describing the non-arising and not dying of if we put our the right mind on the unborn and the undying, it when I'm delivering sentient beings is sentient beings of the illusionary. So if when in every mind, in every thought, we know that the sentient beings are unborn and undying. If we connect our mind always connected to the unborn and undying, then our vexation are also unborn and undying. So then you might ask them, what is here? It says the unborn is the evil and does not arise, and the undying is good deeds that does not end. So the good deeds here includes all the bodhisattvas, 6 paramitas, the four the four collections, and after and so forth. So following that, the mind of the bodhisattva, where should the mind of a bodhisattva abide in? They should abide in the unborn and the undying nature of the sentient beings. So then Vimalakirti said, what is the roots of good and evil? So what is where's the roots? So first we talked about because everything is empty, therefore everything is illusionary. But then he asked, what is the root of good and evil? It is specific to the sattva's body and mind. It includes all the sentient beings, a body. So why do we want to talk about in terms of the sentient beings' bodies? If the world is just if it's just matter and things, then there wouldn't be good and evil. There's only good and evil because there are sentient beings. So then you can understand that, right? Like, so some has looked very much looked up to or look forward to the environment of the temple. And when he came, he has a lot of vexation that arises as he's doing volunteer work. And when he asked the venerable, says, I'm feeling a lot of vexations, but I am seeing all these vexation, all these people. But you know what the venerable says? Says the temple is just made of bricks and stones. So why would you think that the bricks and stone is impure or defiled? It's because in what your mind is defiled and or have vexation, and that's why you're the one that brings the vexation or the defilement into this temple. So what do the sentient beings, what is the root of the body of sentient beings? Craving is the root of the sentient beings. So where does the craving come on? Craving is comes from a delusion. So what is delusion? Delusion is you not seeing that the body is illusionary, and therefore you fall into the cycle of birth and death. And the birth and death is because there is ignorance and craving, and craving also comes from ignorance. So because of time, we can explain a little bit more about this later. How does the great and small vehicle sees the craving is a little bit different? And so what is the roots of craving? The delusion is the roots of craving. So the phenomenon itself does not have desire or vexation. When it's because we see the outside phenomena as real, and therefore we have a discriminating mind. And so this delusion develops the dual thinking. And you see flower, for example, you see flower, it's beautiful, so you want to possess it. So or when it starts to wilt, then you do not want it, you reject it. But the flower itself, does it have a good and bad, or beautiful and ugly? It doesn't. It's illusionary. It's not real. So when the flower is most beautiful, and if you don't water it, it will wilt really quickly. But because of our subjective discriminate mind, we apply that onto the flower, and therefore there is a difference between beautiful and ugly, and good and bad. So the roots of delusion is because we think that it is real. This is what we call the inverted view. We think we think of things that are not real as real. This is the most most rooted inverted views. And not only I wanted these to talk about things that we can all experience. Not only is the phenomenon itself doesn't discriminate. It's all coming from the people or sentient beings that have discriminated. You all know that Zhuangzi, there's a lot of analogies in there, in his writing. If we all know, if you have a lot of moisture, that's generally a bad thing, right? If you live in an environment that has a lot of moisture, you might get tired, you might have arthritis, and if the weather is hot, then you might get in a heat stroke. So the moisture, it's generally a bad thing for us, right? But for fish, for sea creatures, it's a really good thing for them. It's not a problem for them. So moisture, is it good or bad? The definition of good and bad is given by us. So people typically are afraid of height. So for monkeys, that are on the trees, they're not afraid, because they're going from tree to tree freely. And so that is also something that we discriminate and applied. So you've heard this story that there's a at the time there's a really beautiful lady. When she came out and the fish saw the beautiful lady, it was so scared that the fish retreated into the water, and the bird also that saw the beautiful lady also flew away. But that lady is considered the most beautiful woman at the time. You see that what Zhuangzi is trying to say here. This is, but in fact, Zhuangzi is trying to say that the fish and the bird both just got scared, and that's why they retreated and fell down.
So actually, all these external environments and the images of them are actually imposed by sentient beings and not actually what they are. So Zhuangzi in 起物论 by Zhuangzi, at the end of the paper, it talked about Zhuangzi dreaming of butterflies. So if we are all scared of death and we consider it as the greatest pity, but if it's still in the dream, or if is it a dream of mine, or is it a dream of a butterfly? It's all human beings it's us that impose this differentiation on these concepts. It's all like dreaming a dream. It's like when you're dreaming, you're dreaming, and then you would have fewer vexations. This is the baseless discrimination and the inverted thinking. So what is the root of it? Non-abiding is the root of inverted thinking. Well, if you consider it as the actual differentiation, the abiding comes from the unbinding. All the phenomena can change frequently. The emptiness is non-abiding, but your eyes are ignorant. You can still see the flowers in the skies and you consider them as real. But the flowers, the reason why they are in the sky is because of these non-binding emptiness. So all these inverted thinking and baseless discrimination comes from the non-abiding. Non-abiding means there's no root. So non-abiding is rootless. From this non-abiding root, all things arise. So how to get rid of our fear of birth and death? First is to consider everything as illusionary. And the second, everything that you see, all these phenomena related to death and birth, has the root in non-abiding. So there is nothing that you can be scared of. Well, we're kind of slow today because we're almost up. Time's almost up. The next part is the Goddess Discourse on Living Beings. And also talk about how to deliver sentient beings. We'll address all these topics in the next lecture. Thank you very much, Venerable. Now let's open the floor to questions. Again, following the format of the previous lecture, you may use the raise hand function in Zoom, or type in your questions in the chat. And if you're watching the live video on Facebook, you can leave comments in the chat as well. Okay, we have 2 Bodhisattvas who raised their hands before. Please raise your hands again, Angela. And Danny, please raise your hands again so I can see where you are. Okay. Okay, now as they are raising, the Bodhisattvas are raising their hands, let me read this question from one of our audience. Amitabha. Well, the teachings on the Sutra summarizes the themes and very close to the Sutras. The Venerable also quotes lots of classics and Sutras, which is very beneficial for me. I'm really grateful for it. Would you please, Venerable, kind of talk about could you please also talk about another work that's closely related to the Vimalakirti Sutra, that's Yongjiao's Song for the Path to Enlightenment? Venerable has been able to use all the examples in the 2020s to skillfully to explain the contents. And I'm wondering if it's possible for the Venerable to also teach about the sword of wisdom to all of us, for us to go like approach closer to the classics. Well, Li Danli's question has been answered already. Well, we have another question raised by a Bodhisattva from the previous lecture. Let's see if we can talk about the question. Well, he wanted more elaboration on the idea of direct heart, direct mind. The idea of direct mind in Vimalakirti Sutra, there are two places where in the Vimalakirti Sutra, they mentioned the idea of direct heart. One idea is to talk about the results from the causes. How can we use the minds of the sentient beings to be able to enter the pure mind? The second place where the direct mind appeared is to find the places, find the centers to be able to help deliver sentient beings, because the direct mind is the place where we can practice, is the Chang center. Where there are also some extensions to the idea of direct mind, which means that the mind is not, it's straight. Which means that you do not really directly tell all your vexations directly without hiding it. Well, some people think this is direct mind, but actually it's rudeness, is not being very kind. So you show whatever you have and say whatever you think about in your mind. But is it appropriate to the current situation, the context? Is it appropriate to the interaction at the moment? So the action of direct mind is, according to the principle, is to be a transparent person, which is a thorough person. So I have no vexations. I'm not attached to anything. Anything that I do, I can show it. I can manifest it to everyone without feeling bad about it or being attached to anything. I can be really open to everyone. What is the precondition? Well, the precondition is that I have enough wisdom, compassion. That's the precondition to become a transparent person. But to become such a person, you'll have to practice first to, for example, to get rid of the greed and hatred desires at first, and to be able to become a thorough and transparent person, to be open to everyone and show everyone what I am. So you can be real. So straight mind doesn't mean that you show whatever you have, but it means you have no attachments and no vexations. This is the interpretation of straight mind. The second perspective is, if we do not have vexations and attachments, that means that we align with Buddha, the purity and serenity of Buddha. So that extends to the idea that all sentient beings are not different from Buddhas. So because the first level is about a mind without vexations. The second level is that says that every sentient being has root to become a Buddha, and they don't have a mind with doubts. And that also means that they have the direct mind. That means they have the same mind as Buddhas. That is an extended meaning or interpretation of direct mind. you may see in these classics that the idea of direct mind kind of aligns with Buddha nature most of the time. Thank you very much, Venerable. Next, we have Brother Michael. Venerable, I have a question. Well, Venerable, talking about the idea of mind of equality, when we apply it in our daily lives for ordinary human beings, do we have this misconception? If we have the mind of equality, does that mean there's no distinction? For example, in our lives, when we need to take care of other people, for example, if we need to take care of others, then we need to take care of ourselves first. Well, for those who contribute to the center a lot, we need to take care of them. It seems that we still kind of have some differentiation there when we think about taking care of those who contribute a lot to the center. How can we kind of balance the idea of equality and differentiation? Well, some people think that the idea of equality means that there's no differentiation at all. What do you think about that? Well, I think the idea is that we have the awareness that there is a difference in distance, right? Some people are close, some people are not so close. Why do we benefit those who are closer to us? For example, if our parents are ill, they appear to us immediately, right? So they would appear to us immediately because they're close to us. So we know that there is a difference in closeness, but the idea of differentiation is no matter who they are, as long as they're sentient beings in front of me, I would help them, I will lend a hand to them. So as ordinary human beings, of course, those who are closest to us are more accessible, right? We would get in touch with them more closely, more immediately. But the idea of differentiation is that I don't have accusations or attachments when I take care of others. For example, if an old bodhisattva is ill and then has to be treated by the hospitals, but then I don't have all these vexations or angers arising because of all the situations that are happening around taking care of the old bodhisattva. So in summary, some people would think that when one becomes enlightened, they cannot differentiate female, males. It's not that idea. It's that the wise person can be aware of the difference between good and evil, can be aware of the difference between defilement and purity, but they don't have the vexations or attachments. That's no differentiation. That's the interpretations of the terminology. So let's use these two words to kind of tell the differences between these two ideas that could be easier to understand. It's not like when we become enlightened, we become foolish and not be able to tell the difference between these concepts, for example, defilements, purity, females and males. So we have another question here. How can we accomplish non-unbinding root? So this is also what I've been practicing. Why do we have binding? Because we treat the objects as substantial, as real. So Venerable Guoxing has been often telling us this idea. And I've been practicing along with it as well. Matter of fact, it's not like you become an RQ, the character of RQ, and not thinking about everything that actually exists. It's that when we get in touch with the external environment, we have all these thoughts arising inside our mind. When we see someone who's beautiful, we have this mind arising. So she's so beautiful. It's not like we're taking the mindset of RQ and thinking that this person does not exist. Is the image that we have arising in our mind internally. So we have to deal with this mind internally arising. and observe very carefully how this thought changes, how it arises, it disappears.
So the mind continues, and from thought to thought, but will it change? It will change. It continues to change. And if you observe the changes, you can start to see the not abiding. And so therefore, when we see all the phenomenon outside of us that seems to be appear outside of us, outside the mind, don't see it as real, then you won't be abiding it. It's not quite like an AQ, but it's like a reflection of all the mind and thoughts inside of myself, and you learn and observe from the arising and ceasing of the mind activity. So I didn't understand this before. So when I see something that's outside, it's not suiting to what my will, then you're like, oh, I don't like this, and then you might have more thoughts that come out, and that's all extra. That's all just a reflection inside my mind. As long as I contemplate and observe my inside, then you can not abiding. This is just my ordinary person's practice, my understanding. But the great bodhisattvas practice should be very much more transcendental. Not only they are seeing the false nature of the reality, but also seeing the higher value. So this is a very good practice that the Venerable is sharing to us. So thank you, everybody, all the great questions from everybody. So because of the limited time, we'll take our last questions. So Venerable, I have a question. In daily life, all the things that reflect in our mind, I actually recently I encountered these things, certain thing. I'm a person that's very much need justice. So like if people who don't pay their fair share, I would like to see fairness. So I have a problem is how do we handle opposing or situations that is unfair in daily life. So I think that those kind of opposing position it's usually because of people have you're looking at it from a certain perspective. If we can somehow to use a different perspective, then you can reduce the opposing nature of the relationship. We might not be able to see all the things as illusionary, but we can try. I don't often do this, but sometimes I will discuss and read a little bit about videos on politics. But I noticed that in Taiwan, all the politics, the sphere of politics is is polarized. It's very it's clearly the same thing, but depending on the perspective of the side, they will on one side may say that this is worthless, completely worthless, and the other side might say, oh, this is the best thing ever. I think this is very interesting to me. Our people are very susceptible to these polarizing thought, and so if you just happen to choose this channel or to see this other channel, it will make you fall into that one way. Is there kind of a more neutral and more objective way? There is. It is. It's in our mind. If someone says that this is all very great, this is really great, you can try to see if there is something that is not so good about it. Everything, there's no such thing as absolutely fair. If I keep on thinking that something is good, what can I try to see what are the negative sides of it? or conversely, if there are a lot of the negative things I think about it, try to find the good things about it. This is a practice of equality, to see the good in the bad and see the bad in the good. So this is actually the growth of people. When we used to watch a movie when we're young, you always think like, oh, that's a bad person, that's a good person. But for the movies that are more tasteful, they are often so what is the reality of our life? From different perspective, you may see the good and the bad. From this perspective, you might see the good side of it, and from the other perspective, you might see the evil side. We all have this ability. We do not have to be subject to all the opinions of the outside. So because this is the, and if we can see past that, then we can become more mature. We can be more accepting the things that are bad, and or not expect too much from things that are good. So for fairness, I hope that we can come from this perspective. This is still from the perspective of phenomenon. To see the good and the bad, see the bad and the good. And then we can find a conclusion that there's no absolute good, there's no absolute bad. The goods is not real, and there's no absolute real. And so then it resonates with emptiness. And likewise for the bad. So for ordinary people, if we can do that, and to try to see that the not absolute nature of the good and bad, that's about the approach that I might take. This is also my practice, that to handle things that are very polarized. And it's easy to say that to others, but it's much more difficult to practice on yourself. Okay, so thank you, Venerable. Thank you all the very lively participation from everybody. Thank you everybody that we completed the course today. We will conclude the course today. And so we will do our usual etiquette. Let's join our palm. Bow to the Buddha. Bow to the founder of Dharma Drum, Master Sheng Yen. Bow to Venerable Chang. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. So we'll see everybody on Wednesday.
Yeah,